I remember the day the drought came like it was yesterday, the way the air itself seemed to ache. The earth outside my window cracked open in long brown veins, thirsting for something that wouldn't come. My name is Marcia Turner, 52 years old, born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi. And for most of my life, water was something I never thought about. It flowed from the tap, cooled my tea, washed my babies. But that summer, it became a prayer. I live in a small, faded yellow house at the end of Cedar Grove Road. It's been in my family for 3 generations, a place where every creak and floorboard has a memory. Mama used to say the house had character, though I've come to see it more as stubborn, just like the women who lived in it. That summer, I was working double shifts at the nursing home, 12 hours on my feet, tending to folks who couldn't tend to themselves. My back ached constantly, my knees sang songs of protest, and my spirit felt thin. But what really broke me wasn't the work. It was watching my grandson Caleb, 10 years old and wide-eyed with questions, fill up empty milk jugs from a county truck because our water had turned brown again. He looked up at me that morning, sweat glistening on his cocoa skin, and asked, "Grandma, how come our water dirty but theirs ain't?" I wanted to tell him the truth, that it's been that way for generations, that in our part of town, the pipes rusted long before the city ever cared to notice. But I didn't have the heart. Instead, I smiled the way mamas do when they're trying not to break and said, "Because we strong, baby. We make do till better comes." But deep down, I wasn't sure better ever would. At night, I'd sit on my porch under the weak hum of a single bulb, the air thick with heat and memory. I'd hear the sound of crickets and the occasional gunshot echo somewhere too close, and I'd whisper a prayer for clean water, for strength, for change. Then one day, a woman from the city came knocking. Her name was Leah Ross. Young, polished, the kind who wore linen in the summer and didn't sweat. She said she was here to listen to the community. I almost laughed. Folks been listening for years, but not a one of them ever heard us. Still, something about her eyes, steady, maybe a little haunted, made me let her in. "Mrs. Turner, we're trying to understand how this crisis has affected your neighborhood." I wanted to say, "Honey, you can't write down what this kind of living does to a person," but instead, I poured her the last of my filtered water and told her about the children who'd gotten rashes from the tap, about the mothers boiling water just to wash dishes, about how my grandson drew a picture at school of a water bottle instead of a river. She wrote every word, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe someone was listening for real. Still, after she left, I sat by the window for hours, watching the moonlight dance on the empty street. The house creaked, the pipes moaned, and I could almost hear my mama's voice, strong and unyielding, whispering, "Keep speaking, Marcia, even if they don't hear you yet." That night, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let my grandson grow up believing we were invisible. The fight for water, for dignity, had just begun.
I still remember the first day the water came out brown. It wasn't a slow change. It was sudden, almost like the pipes themselves had given up holding back their grief. I turned on the faucet to rinse the collard greens I'd just picked from the garden, and what poured out wasn't water, it was sorrow, the color of rust and old memories. Caleb stood beside me, his small face twisted in confusion. "Grandma, it's supposed to look like that." I wanted to lie, to tell him yes, that sometimes water gets dirty before it gets clean, but I couldn't bring myself to. I could already hear the echo of the pipes moaning in the walls like they were warning me this was just a beginning. I filled a glass anyway, held it to the light. The liquid shimmered with flecks of iron, a metallic smell rising like blood in the air. And for a moment, I saw my reflection ripple inside it. Tired eyes, cracked hands, and the weight of 1,000 small battles nobody outside this neighborhood would ever care about. That night, I boiled the bottled water I'd been saving for coffee and used it to wash Caleb's face. His skin glowed in the soft lamplight so full of life it hurt to look at him. "Grandma, when they gonna fix it?" he asked. I didn't answer. because deep down I knew they weren't coming. Nobody was. 2 days later, I walked down Maple Avenue with my tote bag and my faith, looking for answers. The whole street smelled like damp metal. Children ran barefoot through puddles they shouldn't have touched, their laughter mixing with the rattle of trucks hauling away garbage no one had collected in a week. Miss Geraldine from down the block waved me over. She's 68. Tall as a tree, her hair wrapped in a scarlet turban that made her look like a queen. "Marcia, baby, my water just stopped altogether. You still getting any pressure?" I said, "Barely. And what's coming through ain't worth keeping." She sighed, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "City ain't said a word. They sent some fellas 2 streets over to inspect, but all they did was take pictures. Folks around here tired of being documented instead of helped." Her words stung because they were true. Every few years, someone new came, a politician, a reporter, a preacher, and they always wanted to see, to take notes, to shake hands, but none of them ever stayed long enough to feel the silence after they left. That night, I sat on my porch and listened. You can tell a lot by how quiet a neighborhood gets. Eyes used to hum, music from car radios, laughter from open windows, kids shouting over jump ropes. But now, even the crickets sounded thirsty. The magnolia tree out front, the one I planted the year Caleb was born, looked wilted too, its leaves sagging like tired shoulders. I touched the bark, whispered a prayer. "Lord, give us rain, give us help, give us strength to stand when the world won't." Inside, Caleb slept beside an empty glass, his little chest rising and falling slow. I watched him for a while, and something rose in me, not anger exactly, but a kind of calling, a whisper saying, "If they won't come to help you, Marcia, you go to them." I didn't know where to start, but I knew this: silence had never saved us before, and this time I wasn't about to let it win. By Sunday afternoon, the heat had settled over Jackson like a punishment. You could feel it pressing down on everything, on the tin roofs, on the magnolia leaves, even on the small of your back. The air itself was tired. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait on anybody to save us. After church, I walked from house to house with a yellow notepad and a hand fan that barely made a difference. My plan was simple: gather the women. I figured if we could come together, share what little clean water we had, write down who was sick, who needed help, then maybe we could start pushing back. At first, folks just looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Baby, the city don't listen to us," said Miss Geraldine. "They ain't listened for 50 years. I know, but maybe they'll have to if we speak together. Next, I stopped by Miss Loretta's house. She's 61, with skin the color of sweet molasses and a voice that can hush a room. She was sitting on her porch shelling peas, her eyes sharp even in the shade. "You talking about a meeting?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, at my house. Tomorrow evening, bring whoever you can trust." She nodded slow, and I could see the old fire come back into her. "Then I'll bring the women from choir. We got mouths that know how to make a noise." That night, after Caleb fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the Bible my mama left me. It still smelled faintly of peppermint oil and pressed flowers. I landed on Isaiah 41:17, "When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, I, the Lord, will hear them." I whispered the words until they felt like a promise. By next evening, my small living room was full. 12 women, all different shades of struggle and faith, fanning themselves and sipping bottled water like it was gold. There was Miss Geraldine in her scarlet head wrap, Miss Loretta still in her church skirt, young mothers with babies on their laps, grandmothers like me with tired eyes and straight backs. I don't know where this will lead, but I do know this: we've been quiet too long. The room hummed with murmurs of agreement. One woman spoke up. She's only 32, but looks older, life having pressed her hard. "My little boy got rashes all up his arms from that water. Doctor says it's from the metal. I called the city 3 times, and they told me to just boil it. You can't boil poison." The way her voice cracked tore through us. Another woman nodded. "They say we gotta wait for federal funding, but we pay bills just like everybody else. Why we gotta wait to be treated like people?" I looked around the room at every weary, beautiful face,
and something electric filled the air. It was more than anger. It was recognition. We weren't alone. So I told them what I'd been thinking. We start small. A list of every house without clean water, every child who gotten sick. Then we take that list downtown. And if they don't listen, we make them listen. Miss Loretta smiled slow and dangerous. You sound like your mama, Marcia. She was the first one to get folks registered to vote back in '68. She didn't wait on nobody either. The room filled with quiet laughter and nods. For a moment, I could almost feel Mama there, her voice whispering through the hum of the ceiling fan, her spirit sitting right in that empty chair beside me. Before they left, we joined hands and prayed. The room grew still, the air heavy but holy, our fingers interlocked, our hearts speaking louder than our mouths ever could. When the prayer ended, the women lingered. No one wanted to break the circle, because somehow, in that cramped little living room with peeling paint and weak air conditioning, something powerful had begun. Something that felt like revival.
By Wednesday, the list was 3 pages long. Names, addresses, symptoms, and stories, all written in careful cursive on lined yellow paper. Every line carried somebody's pain. Miss Geraldine's grandbaby with a skin rash. The Carter twins coughing through the night. Old Mr. Jenkins, who hadn't had running water for a week and still sat every morning on his porch like it might come back if he just believed hard enough. We decided to take the list downtown. The morning sun beat down on us like it wanted to test our resolve, but we showed up anyway. 10 women in cotton dresses, headscarves, and church shoes that weren't built for marching. I wore my best floral dress, the one I'd saved for Easter, not because I wanted to look pretty, but because I wanted them to see dignity when they looked at us. We stood on the steps of City Hall, a cracked fountain behind us, the smell of heat and old brick rising around. The glass doors reflected our faces back at us, a wall of women who looked like both history and the future. Y'all ready? I asked. Miss Loretta tightened her scarf. Baby, we were born ready. Inside, the air conditioning hit like a shock. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up. Her name tag said Shannon. Her nails were long, pink, and perfect. Yes, ma'am, she asked without warmth. We here to speak to whoever's in charge of the water department, I said. Do you have an appointment? I held up the yellow papers. We got evidence. She blinked, uncomfortable. You'll need to fill out a form. I could feel the women behind me shifting, the air thickening with that old familiar insult, the one that says, wait your turn, even when your turn never comes. Before I could answer, a tall man in a navy suit came from the back. He had that polished look, light brown skin, thin gold watch, practiced smile. What's going on here, ladies? Water, Miss Geraldine said flatly, or rather the lack of it. He introduced himself as Mr. Carlton, the deputy director. He tried to usher us aside, the way men do when they want you to feel grateful for being ignored politely. But when he saw the names on our list, something in his face shifted. Not sympathy, more like inconvenience. Ma'am, he said carefully, the city is doing everything it can. There's a backlog, infrastructure issues. Backlog? I interrupted. We've been boiling water since July. My grandson's skin breaking out. Baby's getting sick. And y'all got backlogs? The room went silent. Even the clicking of keyboard stopped. Mr. Carlton cleared his throat. We'll have to run tests in each home. You already did, said Miss Loretta, stepping forward. 3 months ago, y'all sent a report and never followed up. He frowned. That's not my department. And that was it. That one sentence lit something in me that no sermon ever could. I stepped closer. Close enough to see the sweat bead on his temple. Then you better find whose department it is, because we ain't leaving till somebody takes responsibility. The other women murmured behind me, a quiet storm brewing. Shannon shifted in her chair, biting her lip. And for the first time in a long while, I saw something flicker in the faces around us. Not pity, not dismissal, but awareness. We weren't invisible anymore. They finally sent us to a small conference room with a pitcher of water we didn't touch. An assistant promised to review the situation and reach out with updates. I knew what that meant.
paperwork and delay. But as we left the hall, a young woman in a navy blazer stopped me. She couldn't have been more than 35, with kind eyes and a journalist badge clipped to her bag. "Mrs. Turner, I'm Leah Ross from the Jackson Herald. I've been covering the water issue for months. Could I speak with you?" Something in her tone felt different, not detached, not rehearsed, real. I hesitated, then nodded. "You can come by tomorrow. Maple Avenue. You'll see the sign that says Faith Lives Here." She smiled faintly. "I'll be there." When we got back to the neighborhood, the heat hit us again, heavy and unrelenting. But it didn't feel the same, because now something had cracked. Not just the pipes, but the silence that had kept us thirsty. We didn't get answers that day, but we've been seen, heard, counted. And sometimes that's where revolutions start.
Leah Ross showed up the next afternoon right on time, notebook in hand, camera bag slung across her shoulder. I could tell she wasn't from around here. Her car was too clean, her sandals too new, her skin untouched by Mississippi sun. But her eyes were open. That was something. I met her on the porch. Same spot where I used to shell peas with my mama. The magnolia tree swayed overhead, its leaves whispering like it knew we were about to stir up something that wouldn't settle easy. "You're Mrs. Turner, right?" she asked. "That's what they call me," I said, "but most folks around here just say Marcia." She smiled, flipping open her notebook. "You said on the phone that the water's been discolored for months." "Discolored?" I chuckled dryly. "Baby, it's brown. Smells like rust and sickness. We don't even let the dogs drink it." Her eyebrows drew together, and she asked if she could see it for herself. I led her to the kitchen. She set up her small camera as I turned the faucet. The water sputtered, coughed, then came out thick and cloudy like liquid clay. Leah covered her nose instinctively. "That's what my grandbaby bathes in, if we can find enough bottled water to rinse him after." Leah took photos quietly, respectfully, not like some folks who gawked at suffering like it was a spectacle. She just listened. We spent the next hour walking the neighborhood. She met Miss Geraldine, who showed her the rash spreading on her grandson's arms. She met old Mr. Jenkins, who sat on his porch fanning himself, his voice gravelly from years of preaching before the congregation scattered. And she met Loretta, who, true to form, didn't mince a single word. "I told them at City Hall," Loretta said, arms crossed. "If this was the nice part of town, them pipes would have been fixed before Sunday service." Leah scribbled notes fast, eyes darting between faces and voices, absorbing every detail like a woman who understood the truth wasn't in the words, but in the pain behind them. At one point, she asked if she could take a picture of us all together. We lined up in front of the church. 10 women, 10 stories, 10 lives holding the same burden. I stood in the middle, my apron still on, my curls pinned back the same way my mama used to wear hers when she meant business. Behind us, the magnolia tree towered like a silent witness. "Okay," Leah said softly, raising her camera. "1, 2. The click echoed through the heat like a promise. That evening, after Leah left, I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. The cicadas hummed, the air thick with the scent of magnolia and humidity. I should have felt hopeful, but all I could think about was the last reporter who'd come through here 5 years ago. Young man, nice smile, said he'd shine a light on injustice. He wrote one story. It made the back page of the Sunday paper, and nothing changed. So I prayed, not for miracles, but for movement, for someone who wouldn't forget. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. "Mrs. Turner?" Leah's voice came through, trembling slightly. "The paper wants to run your story front page. I'm sending a photographer for follow-ups. We're calling it The Thirst of Maple Avenue." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared out at the yard where the first light of morning touched the magnolia leaves, making them glisten like hope. "Well," I said finally, voice low, "looks like it's time to wake this town up." By noon, trucks started rolling in. News crews, environmental groups, even a few city officials who suddenly remembered we existed. Some of the neighbors peeked through curtains, afraid it was all talk again. But I told them, "No, baby. This time, the eyes of the world are watching." And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something in my chest that wasn't just anger
or weariness. It was power, the kind of power you only find when women who've been ignored too long finally start speaking with one voice. For the next few days, it felt like the whole world had found Maple Avenue. News vans lined the streets, microphones pointed at our cracked sidewalks, and people I'd never met stopped by just to say, "We're praying for y'all." The first morning after the story ran, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Reporters, activists, old church friends from out of state. Everyone wanted to talk to the woman whose water turned brown and who refused to stay quiet. Leah's article had hit harder than I expected. There was a photo of me on the front page, standing on my porch, hand on my hip, magnolia tree behind me, eyes steady. The headline read, "She Won't Drink the Lies. One Woman's Fight for Water and Dignity in Jackson." I read it 3 times, heart pounding. Then I set it down beside my coffee and whispered, "Well, Ernestine, I hope you're seeing this." My mama would have been proud. By noon, the city sent someone to inspect our water lines. He was a tall man in a county uniform, sunglasses hiding half his face. He introduced himself as Mr. Clements, voice clipped, polite but cold. "Mrs. Turner, we're aware of the coverage. Just doing our due diligence. Don't want folks thinking we're neglectful." I raised my eyebrow. "You are neglectful, and it's been that way for years." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well now, ma'am, sometimes these things take time." I wanted to tell him time don't wash the dishes or bathe the babies when water runs poison, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I offered him a glass of bottled water and watched him drink it without hesitation. "See," I said softly, "even you don't trust the tap." He didn't answer, just scribbled something on his clipboard and left. That night, I got my first hateful message. It came through Facebook from some stranger with no profile picture. "Maybe if you people paid your bills and stopped whining, your water wouldn't be dirty." For a minute, I just stared at the screen, anger bubbling in my chest like that rusty faucet. Then another message came, and another. Loretta called me later, furious. "They flooding your inbox too?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Seems truth don't sit easy with some folks. They scared, that's all. You poked the beast that been sleeping too long." The next day, I noticed my trash hadn't been picked up. Then the letter came, an official notice claiming I was in violation of property maintenance codes. I laughed when I read it. After 20 years of paying taxes, now they find something wrong with my porch? But it wasn't funny for long. They threatened fines, even hinted at eviction if I didn't comply. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the letter spread out in front of me. Bills to one side, Caleb's homework to the other. For the first time since Leah's story ran, fear crept in. "Grandma," Caleb said, peeking from his room, "you okay?" I folded the letter and smiled for his sake. "Yeah, baby, just grown folk problems." But when he went back to bed, I bowed my head over my hands and whispered, "Lord, give me strength, because I didn't come this far to let them break me now." The next morning, Leah came by again. She'd seen the messages, the backlash, the code violations. Her face was tight with guilt. "I didn't think it would turn into this," she said softly. "I wanted people to care and not attack you." I took her hand gently. "Child, don't you carry that. When you speak truth, you gon' stir the mud. It's how we find out what's been hiding underneath." She nodded, tears brimming. "Then we keep going?" "Oh, we keep going. They want to scare me quiet, but all they done is make me louder." That evening, I gathered the women again at the church. We lit candles, shared stories, and prayed. And when the prayers ended, I stood up and told them what I decided. We not waiting for nobody to save us. We're going to test our own water, document everything, and send it straight to the state. Miss Geraldine looked nervous. "You think they'll listen to us?" "Maybe not at first, but one thing they can't ignore is proof." Loretta smiled wide. "Marcia Turner, you about to turn this whole city upside down." I looked around that small church filled with tired faces, flickering candles, and faith that refused to die. "Maybe," I said softly, "or maybe we're just finally learning how to stand tall." Outside, the night air was heavy and still. The magnolia tree rustled fondly like it was whispering, "Amen." I knew the days ahead would test me, the system, the threats, the loneliness. But I also knew one thing for sure. Once a woman like me starts fighting for something pure, like clean water and dignity, there's no going back. Not until the river runs clear again. After the article ran, things changed overnight. Phones started ringing, cars slowed down when passing our street, and folks who hadn't spoken in years began showing up at my porch with bottled water and questions. But it wasn't just attention, it was awakening. Loretta came by with her clipboard, already scribbling names. Miss Geraldine baked cornbread for the volunteers. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who hadn't been to church since his wife passed, opened the doors and said, "If you gon' fight, you might as well fight from the Lord's house." That's how it started. A handful of tired women sitting in a circle in the fellowship hall, fanning ourselves with hymn books, planning how to hold a city accountable. We called ourselves the Magnolia Mothers because, like that tree in my yard, we'd been bent by the wind, but never broken. The first meeting was messy and beautiful all at once. Voices rose and overlapped. Anger, grief, hope. Loretta wanted protests. Miss Geraldine said she'd rather pray. I sat there listening, letting the rhythm of their voices fill the room. When it quieted down, I said, "We can do both. Pray on our knees and stand on our feet." That line must have struck a chord because from then on, that became our motto. We split up tasks. Some women collected water samples, others called local news stations. I started writing letters to every name I could find online. The mayor, the governor, even the Environmental Protection Agency. I didn't know if anyone would answer, but silence was no longer an option. Tasha helped me with the computer. Lord knows I still peck at a keyboard like it's 1985, but she had patience. She even helped me set up a Facebook page for the group, Voices of Maple Avenue. Our first post read, "We told us to drink and be quiet, but we're still here, still thirsty, still fighting." It went viral overnight. By the end of the week, donations started pouring in. Bottled water, filters, even checks from strangers. Leah, the young reporter, came back, this time with a film crew. "Mrs. Turner," she said, "people want to know how you're doing this, how one small community is shaking up the whole county." I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. "Baby, we're just doing what women have always done, saving the world one kitchen table at a time." That night, after everyone left, I walked outside with Tasha. The moonlight painted silver lines on the magnolia leaves. "Grandma," she said, slipping her hand in mine, "do you think we can really fix this?" I looked up at that tree, its roots deep, its branches wide, and thought about every generation that had come before us, every woman who stood her ground on this same dirt. "I don't know, baby," I whispered, "but we can sure make 'em listen." The wind rustled through the magnolia, soft and strong, like an amen carried through the night.
The morning the first threat came, the sky looked strange, pinkish light, heavy air, like the world was holding its breath. I just finished my coffee when I noticed a white envelope tucked under my door. No return address, no name. Inside, in blocky handwriting, were 5 words that made my heart drop. "Mind your business, old lady." No signature, no explanation, just that. For a moment, I just stood there, letter trembling in my hands. Then I set it on the counter and stared out at the magnolia tree. The leaves moved gently, unconcerned, like they didn't know the world could be so cruel. When Loretta came over that afternoon, I showed her the note. She didn't look surprised. "Girl, that means you hitting nerves," she said, her tone somewhere between pride and warning. "Power don't like to be poked." I tried to laugh, but it came out then. "Poked? Loretta, I'm not poking. I'm just telling the truth." Same thing to them. Still, I didn't stop. If anything, I worked harder. We'd already gotten samples tested through a friend of Leah's, a university chemist who confirmed what we've been saying all along. The water wasn't just dirty, it was dangerous. High levels of lead, manganese, and something else I couldn't pronounce. The report hit like a thunderclap.
Within days, TV trucks lined the street again. People came from neighboring towns to drop off supplies, some bringing casseroles, some bringing cameras. And somewhere in all that chaos, something inside me shifted. I'd started this fight because I was tired of sickness, tired of excuses, tired of being invisible. But now, standing shoulder to shoulder with my neighbors, watching my granddaughter hand out bottled water with her braids glistening in the sun, I felt something else rise up in me. Righteous anger, pride, purpose. We've been underestimated for so long that even we forgot how powerful we were when we stood together. Then came the backlash. City Hall called a press conference that turned into a scolding session. The mayor, clean suit, fake smile, stood at the podium talking about misinformation and public panic. When Leah raised her hand to ask a question, the mayor cut her off. He said, "This matter is under control. No need for hysteria." I felt Loretta's hand tighten around mine. "He did not just call us hysterical," she whispered, jaw clenched. I stood up before I even realized it. My voice carried through that stuffy room like church bells. "If caring for our children is hysteria, then better call every mama in Mississippi crazy." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. The mayor's smile faltered. That night, the threats multiplied. Text, anonymous calls, one car idling too long outside my house. But for every hateful message, there were 10 more from strangers saying, "Keep going. We see you." I couldn't sleep much. I'd sit on the porch with the porch light off, watching the magnolia branches sway in the dark. Tasha would sometimes join me, wrapped in her blanket. "You scared, Grandma?" she asked one night. I told her the truth. "A little." "Then why don't you stop? Because, baby, if I stop, they win, and your future is worth more than my fear." By the end of the week, the Magnolia Mothers weren't just a local story anymore. Leah's video had gone national. The clip of me speaking at City Hall was everywhere. Folks were calling from Chicago, Atlanta, even D.C. Our fight had outgrown the neighborhood. And as the sun rose that Saturday morning, spilling gold across the magnolia leaves, I knew one thing for sure. The storm had only just begun.
It was a cold morning in Jackson when we arrived. Not weather cold, but the kind of chill that comes from walking into a place where you know you're not exactly welcome. The state capitol building stood tall and proud, marble and history gleaming like it had never known struggle. But we carried ours in every wrinkle, every gray curl, every tired step that hit those stone stairs. There were 12 of us that day, the Magnolia Mothers in our Sunday best. We didn't wear suits like the officials inside. We wore what made us who we were. Floral dresses, cardigans, church hats, and shoes made for marching if it came to that. Tasha walked beside me, holding my arm. She had printed out signs that read, "We drink what you ignore." When we reached the top of the steps, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. One young woman stuck a microphone toward me and asked, "Mrs. Turner, what do you hope to achieve today?" I looked her square in the eye. I said, "To remind them that God don't just live in mansions, He drinks from our faucets too." The crowd went quiet for a second. Then applause broke out. Inside, the marble floors echoed like church pews during a funeral. Our footsteps sounded small against the vastness of the building. We were led into a committee room where men in suits and women in pearls sat behind polished desks, all pretending to be very busy. One of them, the chair, I think, looked up and gave me a tight smile. "Mrs. Turner, you have 5 minutes." 5 minutes to explain years of suffering. I took a breath. My palms were damp, my knees trembling just a little, but when I opened my mouth, my voice came out clear. I was born on Maple Avenue, drank that water all my life, raised my children, and now my granddaughter on it. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being a blessing and became a slow poison. A murmur ran through the room. I kept going. "You call it infrastructure. I call it survival. You call it oversight. I call it neglect."
And what I want, what we want, is simple. Clean water, honest answers, and for somebody to finally care enough to fix what's been broken longer than most of us been alive. When I finished, the room was silent. The chair cleared his throat, shuffled papers, and said, "Thank you for your testimony, Mrs. Turner. We'll review the matter." Review. That word stung worse than any insult. Outside, the crowd was waiting. Leah was there too, her camera rolling. "How'd it go?" she asked. I looked back at those tall marble columns, shining like they were untouchable. I said, "They heard me, but I don't know if they listened." Loretta came up beside me, her hand firm on my shoulder. She said, "Then we make 'em listen." And so we did. We stayed out front for hours, chanting, singing, holding signs. News crews filmed, strangers joined in, cars honked in solidarity. The sound rose like a Sunday choir, fierce and unbroken. Tasha started leading the chants, her young voice strong and steady. Watching her, I felt tears well up. Maybe this fight wasn't about me anymore. Maybe it never was. That night, back at the motel, the women were bone tired, but too wired to sleep. We ordered fried chicken and sat in a circle like we always did, laughing between yawns. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting another threat, but this one said, "You don't know me, but my mama lives on Maple Avenue. Thank you for fighting for her." That message stayed with me. I realized then that even when it feels like you're screaming into the wind, somebody's always hearing you, even if they never say it out loud. The next morning, before sunrise, I stepped outside the motel. The air was cold and clean. The first light brushed against the magnolia pin on my dress. I wore it for strength. I whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, give me the courage to keep fighting and the grace to not lose myself while I do." The wind shifted, warm and soft, and just like that, I knew the story wasn't over yet. The battle had moved from our neighborhood to the heart of power, and whether they liked it or not, the Magnolia Mothers had taken root. And roots, real roots, don't scare easy. The morning after we came back from Jackson, the whole town felt different. The air was heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Folks looked at me funny when I went to the store. Some nodded with pride, but others turned away, whispering like I'd stirred up something better left sleeping. At the checkout counter, Miss Ruby leaned in and said softly, "You done made 'em nervous, Marcia. City Hall's been buzzing." I just smiled. Good. Maybe nervous is what they need. But when I got home, there was a letter taped to my porch. No name, no return address, just 6 words scrawled in red ink. "Stop or you lose everything." My hands trembled, but only for a second. Then I folded the paper, tucked it under my Bible, and went to boil water for tea. Fear wasn't old visitor. I just didn't serve it long anymore. That evening, the women gathered at my kitchen table like we always did. Coffee cups, cornbread, and courage between us. Loretta was the first to speak. "They're trying to scare us." I nodded. "And it's working. Just not the way they hoped." Clara leaned forward, eyes flashing. "So what's next? They ain't fixed nothing. Pipes still brown, kids still sick, and those men in suits still talking circles." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Then Tasha, who'd been silent till then, said, "We take it online." We all turned to her. She grinned. "They think y'all too old to know what social media is, but I've been posting your speeches, Grandma. Folks all over the state are sharing them." My heart swelled with both pride and fear. "Tasha, baby, that's powerful, but dangerous." "I know, but so is silence." Within a week, the Magnolia Mothers were viral. Videos of our chants and speeches spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. Leah's documentary clips aired on national news. Suddenly, people were calling from all over. Pastors, activists, even a congresswoman who wanted to visit. But fame came with fire. Anonymous calls in the night, slashed tires. Someone dumped garbage across my yard right under the magnolia tree. When I called the police, they shrugged. "Probably kids," they said. Kids don't leave notes that say, "Go back to your kitchens." Still,
We pressed on. We started holding Sunday town halls right after church. No microphones, no officials, just neighbors talking to neighbors. Folks brought pies, bottled water, folding chairs. It felt like revival and resistance all rolled into one. One afternoon, a young mother stood up and said through tears, "My baby's got rashes all over his arms. They keep saying it's allergies, but I know it's that water." Her voice cracked and the room went silent. I walked over, took her hand and said, "You're not alone anymore, sweetheart. We're going to make sure your baby's safe." She nodded, sobbing quietly, and I realized that was the moment we'd become more than a movement. We were family. But even families break under pressure. A week later, the city posted an eviction notice on my fence. Said my property was under review for unpaid fees. I knew it was retaliation. They couldn't silence me, so they'd try to take the ground I stood on. I sat on the porch that night, staring at the letter. My hands ached, my chest felt tight. The magnolia tree rustled above me, heavy with blooms. Tasha came out, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. "You tired, Grandma?" "Just thinking," I said softly, "how they always find new ways to take what we build." She looked up at the sky. "Then we build louder."
The morning of the congressional visit, the magnolia tree bloomed early. Big white petals opened wide, their scent thick in the warm air, as if Savannah itself was trying to bless the day. I stood on my porch in my Sunday best, a soft yellow dress and my husband's silver cross around my neck. For the first time in months, the air felt light. The yard was still scarred from the fire, the pipes still temperamental, but the house stood, and so did I. When the black SUV pulled up, I recognized the congresswoman from TV. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her 40s, but her eyes had that same old weariness I'd seen in my mirror. She stepped out in heels far too fine for our dirt road and smiled like she meant it. "Mrs. Turner," she said, shaking my hand. "It's an honor to meet you." I gestured toward the porch. "It's not me you're meeting, honey. It's us." Behind me, the Magnolia mothers gathered. Geraldine with her cane, Ruth with her apron still damp from cooking, and Tasha beside them, her phone out, live streaming the moment to the world. Inside, the congresswoman listened as we told her stories, the sickness, the brown water, the cover-ups, the fires, the fear. She took notes, asked questions, and when we finished, she said quietly, "This ends now." I wanted to believe her, but after all these years, I'd learned not to trust promises easily. Still, something about her voice made me think of my own younger self, full of faith, full of fight. After she left, Leah the journalist hugged me tight. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, baby, we started it." The weeks that followed felt like the turning of a tide. News crews came, donations poured in, and the state finally agreed to replace the pipes. Men in hard hats showed up with trucks, and for the first time, clean water gushed clear as glass from my kitchen faucet. I filled a glass and held it up to the light. Tasha stood beside me, filming. "You gonna say something, Grandma?" she teased. I smiled into the camera. "Yes, child. I'm going to say, this water cost us more than money. It cost us peace, patience, and parts of ourselves we can't get back. But we earned every drop." That evening, the neighborhood gathered in my yard for a small celebration. Somebody brought a radio, and Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come" floated through the air. Kids ran barefoot through the grass, laughter mixing with the hum of crickets. I sat in my rocking chair, watching them, feeling something deep and quiet inside me settle. Miss Geraldine raised her cup of lemonade to Marcia Turner, the stubbornest woman in Savannah. Everyone laughed and cheered, and I shook my head, smiling. "To all of us," I said, "to the ones who kept showing up." Later, after the crowd left, I walked out to the magnolia tree. Its branches shimmered in the silver moonlight, petals scattered across the ground like blessings. I placed my hand on its trunk, rough and warm. "You remember it all, don't you?" I whispered. "The fire, the rain, the voices." The wind rustled through its leaves, soft as a sigh. I thought of my husband,
my mother, all the women who came before, those who cleaned white folks' houses, nursed their babies, buried their own with quiet dignity. They'd fought in ways the world never recorded, and now their fight lived in me. Tasha came up beside me, her phone light glowing faintly. "Grandma," she said softly, "people online are calling you Mama Magnolia." I laughed. "Lord, that sounds old and holy," she smiled. "You kinda are." I took her hand, my fingers curling around hers. "You're the next one, baby. Don't you forget that. Every time you see this tree, you remember roots run deeper than storms." She nodded, tears catching in the glow. "I will, Grandma. I promise." Weeks later, I recorded one last message for Leah's documentary. Sitting on that same porch, morning sun warming my face, I spoke straight into the camera. "My name is Marsha Turner. I'm 58 years old, born and raised right here in Savannah, Georgia. Folks tried to silence me, scare me, and burn me down. But see, baby, you can't kill what's rooted in love." This fight wasn't about anger. It was about home, about making sure our babies have water to drink in a world that sees them as worthy. So if you're watching this, remember, we're all somebody's tree, somebody's shelter, somebody's legacy. Don't ever stop blooming. When I finished, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The magnolia petals fell one by one, soft as prayers. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace, knowing that even when I was gone, the story would keep growing just like the roots beneath my porch. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of remembering. The night the fire started, I smelled it before I saw it, that sharp, bitter sting of smoke rolling through my open window. I ran outside barefoot, my heart hammering. The magnolia tree glowed orange at the edges, shadows dancing across the yard. And then I saw it, flames licking up the side of my shed, sparks flying toward the porch. "Tasha," I screamed, "get the hose." She came running with the garden hose, but the water sputtered and died, the pressure gone again. We beat the fire with wet towels, shouting for help until the neighbors came running with buckets. It felt like forever before someone called the fire department. When they finally arrived, most of the shed was gone. My tools, my husband's old records, the boxes of newspaper clippings, all burned. But the house and the magnolia still stood. I stood there in my nightgown, shaking from the smoke and fury. One of the firefighters looked at me with pity and said, "Could have been worse, ma'am." I looked him straight in the eye. "It already is." By sunrise, word spread faster than the flames had. Folks said it was arson, someone wanting to send a message. There were no suspects, no witnesses, and the police didn't seem in much of a hurry to find any. But I knew what this was. When you stand up to power, they stop whispering and start burning. Tasha sat beside me on the porch steps, her hair smelling faintly of smoke. "We should stop, Grandma. Please, they're gonna hurt us for real next time." I turned to her, tears stinging my eyes. "Baby, they already did. When they poisoned our water, when they told us to hush, when they decided our lives were disposable, that's when the hurting started. I can't stop now." She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as her soft old grandmother, but as something harder, older than both of us. That afternoon, Leah came back. Her camera was smaller this time, her questions gentler. "Mrs. Turner, do you ever regret starting this?" I thought for a long moment, the sound of hammers and repair work echoing around me. "No, honey, I regret we had to." She nodded, her eyes wet. "People are listening. That congresswoman called again. She's coming next week." That night, I barely slept. The magnolia tree outside looked ghostly in the moonlight, half its leaves singed but still standing tall, unbroken. A few days later, a storm rolled through Savannah, one of those heavy spring rains that turns the streets into rivers and washes away everything that's not rooted deep. The thunder shook the windows, lightning flashed white across the yard, and then the pipes burst. Brown water gushed from the kitchen sink, flooding the floor. Tasha screamed from the bathroom as the toilet overflowed. It was chaos. The storm outside, the flood inside, and me trying to save what little the fire hadn't already taken. When it was over, the kitchen was soaked, the smell of rust and mold in the air. I sank into a chair, exhausted. For the first time, I wondered if they were right. Maybe I was too old for this fight. Maybe I'd lost too much already. Then there was a knock on the door. It was Miss Geraldine. Drenched, hair sticking to her forehead, a flashlight in her hand. Behind her stood a dozen women, all in raincoats, holding towels and buckets. We saw the lights. You didn't think we'd let you drown alone, did you? I laughed through tears. Lord, y'all gonna make me cry again. All night we cleaned and mopped, singing hymns between sobs. Precious Lord, take my hand never sounded so raw, so alive. By morning, the house was dry again, and so was my fear. When Tasha woke, I handed her a cup of coffee. Call Leah. Tell her to bring that camera back. She frowned. Why? After everything that just happened, I smiled faintly, because people need to see this too. Not just the speeches and the rallies, but the cost of it, the fire, the flood, and the faith that keeps us going. That footage went viral again. This time it wasn't about protest signs or chants. It was about resilience. The Magnolia Mother standing knee-deep in flood water, wringing out rags and singing. The world saw not our suffering, but our survival. And somewhere deep down, I knew they could burn our sheds, flood our homes, and still, we'd bloom again, because like the magnolia, we'd learned the secret of Southern women. The deeper the roots, the stronger the return.